candidate at the Hertie School of Governance. Sephoris is an international research project on social enterprises funded by the European Commission. Sephoris sets out to explore the role that social enterprises play in the EU and beyond in the development of and evolution towards inclusive and innovative societies. This session focuses on governance of social enterprises, and more particularly on the way in which governance practices and tools can be helpful for social enterprises, both in ensuring accountability and in developing the organization. During this session, we will look not just at the formal and traditional elements of organizational governance, but also at some innovative ones. By looking at what social enterprises from our Sephoris case studies and survey are doing in this regard, we hope to help you think differently about governance. In this sense, governance can be a resource for a social enterprise and not just a compliance tool or a constraining supervisory element in the life of the organization. Governance can be used creatively to address the challenges of social enterprises. In the Sephoris project, we talked to social enterprises from 9 countries. Depending on the particularities of the context in which they operate, these social enterprises choose and are subject to different ways of organizing. They also have different ways of adopting and implementing governance practices. What do we usually think about when mentioning governance? Traditionally, it refers to supervisory bodies of the organization, such as advisory boards or boards of trustees. However, governance entails these formalized as well as other informal practices of the organization. This mix of different governance elements and practices can be used as a development tool for organizations, and this is what we will illustrate in the following minutes. Let's start with a short overview of what we already know when it comes to organizational governance. In the literature, governance is defined as the systems and processes by which organizations are directed, controlled, and held accountable. There is a lot of academic work both on corporate governance and on nonprofit governance. The corporate governance literature focuses on issues of control within an organization, taking a principal-agent approach where one supervisory board controls and evaluates the management. In the nonprofit governance literature, the focus is extended to addressing the interests of a broader variety of stakeholders. The governance of social enterprises builds on and combines elements from both of these approaches, but also goes beyond them. Firstly, in these organizations, the governance challenge is to respond to the hybrid nature of the social enterprises, making sure that the social mission is not jeopardized, while also ensuring that the financial goals for the survival of the organization are met. Simultaneous accountability to both beneficiaries and investors or funders is important. Social enterprises are therefore a potential breeding ground for innovative forms of governance, combining and going beyond corporate and non-profit governance approaches. This in turn can help them not only deal with internal issues, but it can also help them cope with the diverse external environments. These environments in which they are embedded face social enterprises with multiple accountabilities to donors, investors, beneficiaries, and the public. As I mentioned before, we can distinguish between formalized and informal governance systems and practices in social enterprises. Let's focus on the first category. The legal form of the organization has an importance for the governance setup of social enterprises, as some governing bodies are stipulated in the national for-profit or non-profit legislation. Therefore, an organization must in some cases have a board of trustees with decision-making power in the organization. The advisory board is another formalized governance body, even if it doesn't have formal decision-making power. Certain reporting practices can themselves be formalized through the requirements of particular partners or funders, and even more so when they are required by the national government. As you can see, most of these elements and practices have a strong role of ensuring accountability and of controlling the right use of resources and the achievement of goals by the organization. On the other hand, the informal governance systems and practices are not legal requirements for social enterprises, and they often emerge from over time as a result of experience and specific challenges that the organization is facing. For instance, instead of establishing establishing a formal advisory board with regular meetings and responsibilities, the social enterprise can build a loose network of partners and contributors that have expertise on relevant issues for the organization and that provide an input more on a needs basis rather than on a predetermined schedule. Another example would be that social enterprises can create feedback loops to the beneficiaries and all the team members of the organization. This would increase accountability, while at the same time encourage dialogue and input from all the members of the organization. These informal governance systems, and other more, are more oriented towards the developing needs of the organizations and the way in which different stakeholders can contribute to solving them. The social enterprises we interviewed during the Sepphoris project told us about their own governance structures and practices and how they make them work in their favor. In the following minutes, I will go through some examples based on their experience. Thinking about governance very often starts with thinking about the legal form of the organization. The spread of certain legal forms can differ quite a bit between countries. If in China or Russia, more than half of our sample are organizations registered with a for-profit legal form, in Romania, over 90% of the sample is registered as a non-profit. This, of course, is also related to the acceptance that certain legal forms benefit from in the social sectors in which social enterprises are active. Social enterprises in our sample not only use legal forms to signal their conformity to established regulation, but they also use them creatively in order to serve their organization. In 6 out of the 9 countries in which we conducted the survey, social enterprises have 2 legal forms, usually a mix of a for-profit and non-profit legal form. This helps them keep the fiscal responsibilities separate and clear, while also gaining more flexibility in setting up their activities. This is a very common practice in the UK, China, and Sweden, for example. Secondly, social enterprises in our studies use board of trustees and advisory boards in 2 different ways. While some of them use them as a compliance tool to existing legislation, others see them as a strategic element in the development and prospects of the organization. For the social enterprises that have a board only for the purpose of conforming to legal requirements, this might be a lost opportunity. In the social enterprises where board membership is diverse, with members being businessmen and women, social workers, policymakers, for instance, organizations approach their board members as a resource who can help the organizations with different needs and challenges over time. In the case of some German social enterprises, for example, advisory board members act as ambassadors and endorsers of the organization. They help it in this way have access to more resources, become more visible, and gain acceptance from peers. Advisory board members can even act as guarantors for the quality of the work done by the social enterprise in the eyes of funders or other resource providers. Another example of how the boards can contribute more deeply to the development of the social enterprise comes from the UK. Here, some social enterprises evaluate their board members in order to see if they correspond to the needs of the organization. This is a practice that has been welcomed by the board members themselves in order to increase the quality of their input and tailor it to the particular situation of the organization. Board membership is also strongly related to the idea of inclusive governance in social enterprises. While not many social enterprises include their beneficiaries in their boards, the ones that do use their input as a constant opportunity to adapt services and products to their sometimes changing needs. Including beneficiaries in the board of trustees or advisory board is of course challenging in terms of setting up the right structures and procedures in which they are encouraged and enabled to actively participate. It requires intense reflection on behalf of the management and staff of the organization so that the beneficiaries become genuinely active contributors in the governance process. Another way in which social enterprises can account more for the interests of their beneficiaries is by formally establishing boundary positions in the organization. These boundary roles are fulfilled by key employees that safeguard the interests of the beneficiaries, while also paying attention to the operational and financial requirements of the organization. For example, in a work integration social enterprise, the person fulfilling this boundary role accompanies and consults the beneficiaries in their daily work, while also maintaining close contact to the management in reaching the productivity and quality targets of the organization. There is still a lot of space for innovation in regards to inclusive governance structures in social organizations in general, and this is one area in which social entrepreneurs can have an important contribution through their alternative practices. Last but not least, our data indicate that through their reporting practices, social enterprises contribute to developing governance measures beyond legal requirements, and through this, they contribute to setting new standards in the field. For instance, social enterprises in Germany use the Social Reporting Standard Framework in order to illustrate their commitment to social impact measurement and to the transparency of their actions. With this, the social entrepreneurship sector is developing a stronger emphasis on impact, transparency, and measurement, and is in this way also increasingly setting standards for other organizations in the social sector which are not that transparent. Reporting can be a tool for communicating success and positive impact, but it can also be a reflection tool for the organization. Besides reassuring the funders that things are going well and that the organization performs, the reporting periods can be a good moment to reassess the efficiency and effectiveness of processes, the focus of some activities, and their effects on beneficiaries. Surprising measurements or insights from qualitative evaluation can be used for improving the activity of the social enterprise. This can also be an opportunity to innovate in products or services and to adjust activities to emerging needs of beneficiaries, thus improving accountability towards them. We often forget that failures are also important tools for developing organizations. Therefore, systematically tracking not only success and impact indicators, but also failures, mistakes, and unforeseen consequences of your activities is essential. Over time, this will ensure constant improvement and adaptation of your services. More importantly, this will ensure that your organization not only operates and grows, but is also able to learn. These are just some first few insights regarding the diverse governance practices and structures that social enterprises from different countries use. As you could see, their role in ensuring a certain degree of control of the activity of the organization is very much present and important. But at the same time, social enterprises also find innovative, sometimes informal governance mechanisms that can help them develop. We hope that by providing you with a short overview of what these alternative governance mechanisms could be and how they can serve the organization, we managed to also give you a new perspective on governance, not just as a compliance tool, but also as a potential resource for your organization. We hope we gave you some food for thought in regard to three things: how the setup of the board can influence and serve the development of your organization over time, how inclusive governance systems can be developed through the contribution of beneficiaries, and how impact and success, but also failure and unintended consequences, can systematically be captured and learned from. We're looking forward to the discussion on these issues based on our brief input, and we're especially looking forward to hearing also your own experiences in these areas. Thank you very much for watching and for joining us for the Sequoris MOOC. Stay tuned for the next module in which our colleagues from KU Leuven in Belgium will present